It's Monday night. Yep, I'm repping Morehouse tonight. I just felt like just throwing on something, repping HBCUs. Shout out to the Rattlers over in Tallahassee for going to the Alonzo Stagg Bowl by winning the SWAC championship. I think they play Howard next weekend. Congratulations. We talked a little bit about that. It's Monday night, 8 p.m., YouTube, Facebook Live. How about you? Dialogue with Dozell. You got your boy DB flying solo tonight. No guests. My co-pilot won't be with us tonight. It's just going to be you and me, you and I. Mama, how do I say it? You and me or you and I? It's us tonight. Before I get to the topic tonight, let me just do a little housekeeping about the next couple of the upcoming episodes of the show. It's Advent season. It's Christmas time. I am not going to do any heavy political shows. Before we left to go on that awesome getaway, the show, we did about 3 straight weeks of the events occurring over in the Gaza Strip in Israel. And I had some light stuff planned. That was very newsworthy, very current, and it dictated it. Thank you, Erica Ross, Sister Erica Ross, for joining us after your traumatic time over there. I've never seen her. She's a strong woman, a strong sister, and I've never seen her to the point where she was, but we understand what she went through, a harrowing experience, and so grateful to have escaped it. And she called us literally at the 11th hour that first night. We were signing on and going on with the show is playing, and she signed on and asked, was it too late? Shout out to her for coming on. I think we were the first interview show she did, and we're just so grateful. And then we had a couple other shows, but that was all. I didn't plan. They were not planning to do 3, even though that was in the midst of a start of a war. I make an executive decision, I guess, Madam Producer. I might be the executive producer of Dialogue with Dozell. It's Advent. I'm a preacher. We're gonna do feel-good stuff or enjoyable things for the rest of the year. I hope that's all right with you all. Tonight it's kind of fun thing, and then next week we have a couple giants in the humanitarian industry and how they bless people. We want to make that the feel-good story as we kind of exit out of here. Mac, what up, man? As we kind of exit out here, and then Christmas, the 25th is on a Monday night, so there won't be a dialogue. You guys probably tired of seeing the rerun of the first Dialogue with Dozell Christmas. It was a very Varner Christmas. It was a great show. We worked through a few production miscues, but all of our family talked about favorite Christmas movies, Christmas scenes, Christmas songs. We'll discuss it with Madam Producer, but that might not. And then on January the 1st, the following week, New Year's night, well, games and stuff. We're not going to do a dialogue on that night, but January the 2nd, we're going to do Dialogue with Dozell on a Tuesday night. We've done that once or twice, and we want to move that to a Tuesday night if we can. I need to check with Madam Producer on that. So your dialogue will be that's a set. Now, one of the things I had thought to do, I wanted to do at the end of the year. I wanted to do a thing where we looked at TV shows since the beginning of time, the beginning of TV series, and kind of do a countdown and see what's your favorite, what is your favorite TV series of all times. And when I started trying to do that, I said, oh, wow, this is far bigger than anything we could capture in one show. Then when I started looking at it further, this is far bigger than anything we can capture in a series of shows. So likely over in 2024, at least one night a month, we're going to dedicate it to our favorite TV series of all times. And we're going to look at that. We've come up with 15 different categories of TV. And maybe we may dedicate one to one night. We may be able to get two in one night, but maybe we'll try to do that for for the genres of TV that are less popular, so that we can do it in the scope of a year. And we're going to look at the TV series and get your comments. Mac, you've been around about as long as I have, and you can tell us a little bit about these series and talk about the characters and so forth. So that's what we're going to do, at least one night a month. And I'll be inviting people. For instance, I'm not a fantasy TV guy. I'm not that Star Wars type guy, or that's a movie, but what was the science fiction? That's not my cup of tea. So we'll have guests on for people who do that, that's their favorite, and we'll talk about them throughout history. Some genres of TV have kind of dried up. We no longer do them. We don't have the variety shows on TV we used to, but we will dedicate a segment or a night to looking at those and discussing some of the favorite ones. And those are some of the things. Because February, we're going to be very high on African American history. And by the way, this is a Native American History Month, and we'll be talking more about that next week when we celebrate our humanitarians who serve to make life better for others during this season. We want to kind of just highlight that and celebrate that. Tonight, we're going to look at the television and how your viewing habits have changed since the advent of streaming services, of podcasts, the YouTube generation, and the like. And I'll have to admit, well, I think I'll just say when we talk about YouTube, somebody remind me when I talk about YouTube, to talk about my experience while we were in Europe with YouTube. We're going to hit that right about now. Share this program out. Tell somebody about it. Good morning, Miss Eli. Tell somebody about it. Good morning, Eli. I'm sorry. Tell somebody about it, and hop on this journey for the next 50 minutes or so. We're going to talk our viewing habits and how they have changed. So let me start right now. During the pandemic, and that's a particularly, I don't know if we want to call it, big guy. Can a big guy like me get away with using the term sentimental? My wife, like I told you, the house really became a man cave for me, because she relegated me to this house because I have a couple of medical conditions that made me susceptible to. They said you were more susceptible to COVID, and so because of these and because of that, I stayed in the house. I think you've heard me say this numerous occasions. I'll say it one more time anyway. Okay. My friend and I, my co-host Pastor Real and I would walk. We walked the golf course 3 days a week. We walked the golf course. They were all shut down at the time, and unfortunately, the one that we walked never reopened. We would walk the golf course 3 days a week, and maybe once or twice a week, maybe once a week, I'd have to go to the grocery store. My wife kind of handled a lot of that to keep me away from being around people. But a couple times I tip right down the street to Publix. I just say it. I go down to Publix and use every precaution and all of that stuff. And then occasionally, because we weren't going anywhere, I never, my gas supply never got short. But I was glad when it did, because I would run down to the Hard Rock Casino where I get gas down in Hollywood, and that would be tantamount to going on a field trip. I get to drive my car some distance. I get to see some places and some people that I, normally would see all the time in passing. And the pandemic did that for me. One of the other things it did for me, my son, this program is named after him, the real Dozell, told me about a lot of programs that he and his kids looked at on Netflix. and I had hardly used Netflix up until that time. And Netflix became a friend of mine during this period. Netflix is the premier streaming service on TV. If you have a smart TV, you can access it on TV. You can access it all these streaming services on your any device, iPads, phones, tablets, whatever your device of choice is. And I absolutely fell in love with several television series that I think some of them were even originally produced by Netflix. Imposters was one of them, and it was a cute. I don't know if you call it a crime drama. It was like a program that I saw as a kid called Run Buddy Run. It was just always some craziness and zaniness going on Imposters, and unfortunately, they only shot one season of it. And I don't know if it was their original or not, but they broadcast. So it took me to Netflix, and I started seeing a plethora of programming on Netflix. I'm a sports junkie. A lot of sports features. There were a lot of dramas, a lot of biographies. I'm a history junkie, and there was just a lot of stuff. This thing that I would always bypass on the way to accessing YouTube on my phone, on my TV, now became something that I was quite familiar with and enjoyed. But it just opened the door to all of the streaming services now on TV. And Netflix is, and let me tell you the story on Netflix. And I heard this on, I think, listen to one of Joel Osteen's sermons. He talked about somebody trying to pitch an idea to Blockbuster, and Blockbuster didn't receive it. A business plan. They tried to pitch to Blockbuster, and Blockbuster didn't receive it, and it was going to be sold for minimal dollars to Blockbuster, and would fall under Blockbuster's umbrella of programming. So Blockbusters would have the CDs and DVDs. DVDs. I don't know if we have CDs anymore, but they have the DVDs for rentals, and then you would also have you'd have this be exposed to this streaming service, and Blockbuster refused it. I think that whoever the representative from Blockbuster was kind of laughed at this representative who was pitching what eventually became Netflix, and he left out of his office. And so Netflix went ahead and pitched his business plan independently. Now it is amongst, if not the leading streaming service. So why am I spending all this time talking about Netflix? Some households don't have TV. They buy a smart TV so they can access these streaming services. And Netflix is one of the larger of those. Another of the streaming service that you get a lot of program, not full program, but you get a lot of their program is a Peacock network. And we do Peacock because we self-confession, I am a bona fide television holic, a TV junkie. And that's right, Mac. The way it just kind of streamed play on words, the way it just popped onto the scene. And so Peacock was where I was accessing my co-host, my partner in crime, my ace, my boom cool, my brother KV told us about the series. If I could think of the name of it, Yellowstone. He said, "Man, that has been the hottest thing on." He said, "So it streams on Peacock now." And so I went to Peacock, and actually it was streaming all of the past shows were on Peacock, but the current shows were on Paramount, which is owned by CBS. Peacock is, by the way, owned by NBC. So all of the networks have jumped into this streaming. I think Hulu is owned by ABC. And so the networks have popped into the streaming services, and streaming services have become highly popular. And in some measures, they are alternatives to traditional TV. So what gave me the impetus for tonight's show was I was looking at the Stephen A. Smith show, not First Take, but Stephen A. Smith show, and I'll talk more about that on the other side of the break. So looking at the Stephen A. Smith show, and Stephen A. Smith has this. He is the face of ESPN right now. He has a $9 million annual contract, and his contract is due up, I think, in 2 or 3 years, and he's already starting to tap into this. Yeah, that's the Stephen A. Smith show. So I just say he has his own podcast. He does this podcast 3 days a week, and it airs over YouTube. And of course, a podcast you can look at anytime you want to. And Stephen A. Smith was speaking, and he was saying, bro, he was talking to Kevin Garnett, who has just launched his own podcast network. He's just now introducing himself to becoming like a media mogul. And I was just up the other morning, had awakened early or something, and I was just looking at this, and I heard Stephen A. Smith said, "I've been fired enough to make up in my mind that I will never ever be without a job again." In other words, he has a spirit of entrepreneurism. He will never allow himself where he totally depends on somebody else for his income. And I said, wow. And I think his podcast head up to already in just a few months 400,000 subscribers to the YouTube page of the Stephen A. Smith show. So Stephen A. Smith started talking about what our young people are looking at now. And he simply said, young people they don't want to look at TV when you got to be there in front of your TV at a certain time, or you have to you set your DVD to catch your program. And if it occurs on a Sunday when football, the NFL is in full season, those programs usually run over, or if it's a Fox program, they run over at night. And so those programs were bring me back up, Toy, if you would. Those programs would the timing would be off, and so while you're taping them, you're kind of missing the beginnings, or they're cutting off early. And he said, and so young people, this "I want it now" generation, he said, and that's not all bad. He says, when we have we have opportunities to facilitate them. That's what we need to do, and that's what we'll do. So he talked about how young people, they want to see stuff on TV, they want to see it on their phone when they're around. So having a program at your fingertips when you want to see it. And he said, so I'm getting ahead of the curve. So Stephen A. Smith has invested. He like me, he has a studio here in his home, or up there in his home, but he also has invested not too far from his home. He has invested into a studio where he tapes his podcast, and he's going to do other programming, and then he's going to have an umbrella network where others will be under him. And so I just thought that was awesome. $9 million, and you're saying that you can go out and create. He has one of the gambling service now. I'm telling you now, I am totally against gambling. And people who gamble, that I have, you're all right with me, but I'm totally against it. I have seen members of my family whose lives it has wrecked. So I'm totally against gambling. But a lot of them have been and he is sponsored by one of those services, and those services and other services and advertisers will give you what you're asking for. I'm going to talk about on the other half of the hour. When we talk more about podcasts, I'm going to talk about somebody who hit it big and basically wrecked the whole network, making room to accommodate that person and dumping the contracts and laying off a lot of other people just to bring this person on because they were hot out in the. I think we still refer to this as the social media world, and that's what they did. So and if you see me looking, yeah, I'm from Duval. I'm from Jacksonville. The Jags haven't been on Monday Night Football in a long time. And so I've got the TV going. I'm kind of like glancing at, just keeping. I do that every Monday night, but y'all don't know that, okay? So streaming services have become big because of the availability. That's one thing. People can see their programming whenever they want to see it. So we gave you Netflix. We talked about Netflix. We talked about Peacock, but there's Paramount Plus, Disney has a streaming services. There are just a multitude of streaming services for all ages, all categories of TV viewing, and these streaming services have made it palatable for viewers, and it has caused the viewership of cable TV companies and traditional programming in TVs to diminish. My co-host, my cousin Janice, when I say co-host, KV is my main co-host, but often this is his and my show. But we have other co-hosts that serve us sometime that come in. And Janice has told me, she told me a long time ago. I mean, I think she's trying to slap me on the hand. She said, I don't spend money for paying a cable network to show me what they want to show me. And the thing is, I think she's saying I stream in what I want to pay for or see what I want to pay, what I want to see. Now, it's one of my what do they call it? One of my whatever kind of pleasures. TV is that for me. So I make the major investment. It's just one of the things that I choose to do. I know a lot of stuff. I'm versed because I watch a lot of TV and I watch various. I watch, yes, LM. It is a thing in the past. I watch the various genres of TV. I'm kind of stuck with all of it when there's hot news, particularly during a political season. I lean towards the networks, the news networks like MSNBC. That's number one. CNN, and if I really can stomach it, I've already eaten and taken some medication so I don't upchuck. I'll pop over that to that news channel that calls itself Fair and Balanced, and let's see. LM, hey man, how you doing? All right. Those is always talking about you, man. Thank you for hopping on tonight. You're Jabo's son, right? Well, I'll wait for So Jabo's son. So what does it mean, Jabo for mayor? 2024, a lot of here, all day, all night, baby. That's what this thing is about. So thank you for hopping in and learning. So this is a young man. He's my son's age. Puts him in his mid-30s. And he's saying that cable is definitely a thing of the past. So y'all help me to be cured from cable TV, because I look at, it gives me a wide spectrum, and then I still do the streaming. So just you got to help me with this thing, because I'm guilty. It's my guilty pleasure. That's the thing I look for. Listen, I remember when cable TV, I was telling somebody today what the show was going to be about, and actually it was Dozell, and he said, Dad, you didn't look at he was talking about how Disney had bought Marvel out several years ago, and he talked about some of the programming. And he said, you didn't look at some of those things when you were growing up. Y'all were not allowed to. That was a little jab, I think. He said, y'all were not allowed to look at some of the things that came on Marvel. I said, yeah, that was just not my choice. I looked at traditional cartoons, Johnny Quest, Top Cat, Peter Gunn. Peter Gunn's not a cartoon. But I looked at cartoons where the Jetsons, where people were not getting killed, getting shot all the time. I looked at the cartoons where when somebody was scared and they were running, their teeth would bounce out like this and their hair would pop up like that. Remind me to tell you about that. I'll tell you about that, but not right now. And so those are the cartoons I looked at. I didn't care too much for the dark cartoons. I'm not a big, as you heard me say earlier, I'm not a big I'm not a fantasy TV guy. I'm not a big science fiction guy. So when we do those shows, I'm going to be needing people to hop on with us. So what I was trying to say is, so cable TV allows the plethora. It gives you the full amount, but it also comes with a big price. And you could do a couple streaming services a month. And I was telling Dozell that I remember broadcast TV when it was transitioning, y'all. No old man jokes, y'all. Okay, but I was watching TV when it was transitioning from black and white to color. Everything was black and white when I first started watching TV. Then it slowly you started seeing color phased in, and by the late 70s, the late 60s and the early 70s, color was predominantly what we looked at. Can you imagine that? That's funny. You go on your app and you make a picture black and white, and that's something cool to do. Well, that was all we had back in the day. But when those were back there, all you had were two TV networks, if you can believe it. This was pre-cable. You had ABC. I'm sorry, you had CBS and you had NBC. So NBC had the national, the American Football League, the AFL, which is now the American Football Conference, and CBS had the National Football League, and all of that, of course, has changed up. But those were the only two broadcast TV. Those are the only two networks that you had. Then in the late 60s, ABC popped up, and if you took the rabbit ears on your TV, and I don't know, according to what that going on in the atmosphere, I guess, if you took that and maneuvered them a certain way, you could get ABC. It would be real fuzzy, but you could diminish some of the fuzz and you get some new innovative programming. And that's when the series Batman and Green Hornet and all that stuff, we used to watch that stuff. So that was pre-cable. I learned about cable when I went to North Carolina to my cousin's house, and I saw this cable. They moved the TV in this long cable. I said, "What's that?" They said, "This is cable TV." So you see how clear the TV is? The stations will be clear, and theoretically, it was supposed to be more programming. More stations, and supposedly it was supposed to be light commercial. Yeah, supposedly, kind of like Sirius XM, right? Commercial-free listening. Got your commercial-free listening. So those were pre-cable, and then cable has enjoyed a nice 30, 40-year run, I guess now. And now these streaming services are banding to threaten the monopoly on cable TV. We're going to go to the break. We're going to come back and talk about podcasts. Thank you all for hopping on. Gotcha, Matt. They got all of your virtual needs, your podcast, your web building, GoGigaWorld.com. Hey, contact them. The tutorials, Markia and company, I promise you, they'll hook you up. They'll make you look good. You'll love your presentation, and they give you expert guidance and mentoring to make your production the best that you'll see on whatever platform you show it. So, it's been a while. This is a season to be jolly, so I'm gonna try to stay away from the Dane dogs and what's got your blood boiling and are you serious? But tonight is dialogue history. 2, are you serious? The first one. So I watched college football. I blocked the day away, beginning Friday night with Washington and the beloved Oregon Duck, and watched several championship TV conference championships on Saturday, so that I could watch and do my own prediction of how the Final Four playoff picture would end. I saw what was tantamount to a pretty ugly football game, FSU and the University of Louisville for the ACC championship. This was only after I had seen, this was only the Jaguars just scored. This was only after I had seen Alabama defeat Georgia in the SEC championship game. Wow. So FSU played a pretty ugly game. As you know, their first string quarterback is out for the season. He was injured 3 games ago. And the quarterback, the second string quarterback, brought them back from being behind against the beloved Gator down in the swamp 2 weeks ago. Was now last week against the Gator. And at the end of that game, he was injured. He's in the concussion protocol, and the concussion protocol usually keeps you out a game if you're not cleared before that next game. To my utter surprise, even though the game against Louisville was an absolute dog, and even though that quarterback, that freshman, who probably had no idea he would ever see the football field during his freshman year, played a horrific game. It was an offensive tragedy. It was horrific. But FSU's defense kept them in charge of the game. It kept Louisville out of the end zone with an interception in the end zone. And then the offense was able to do just enough with a few plays here to put a few points on the board, put some field goals on the board. And after winning that game, after winning the ACC championship, there was no doubt in my mind that the Final Four, the 4 teams that would play for the college championship would be Michigan. Mad Dog would say Michigan, Washington, FSU, and I was wondering who the 4th team would be. It probably couldn't be Georgia because Bama had just defeated them. They couldn't get Bama and Texas in because if you put Bama in and then put Texas, that would just cause all kind of craziness because Texas had defeated Bama. So I had no idea. And I was looking at, our services were virtual yesterday. So I was sitting here looking at when the Final Four teams were announced. College Football Playoff Committee. Are you serious? You got to be kidding me. You have forsaken an undefeated Power 5 team and raised up an Alabama team just because they're Alabama, just based on their history and just based on this myth that they had to be there. You've knocked an undefeated FSU team out that won their last 6 games last year and ran the table this year. Are you serious? They defeated 3 top 10 teams, 2 SEC teams, and you knocked them out, will not allow them to be in the playoffs? Are you serious? And I've listened to your explanation. I've been listening all weekend. I've been listening. I've looked at First Take. I've looked at Undisputed. I've been looking at everybody's take on this. And you cannot justify leaving FSU out. Now, this is funny. You got a Gator, and I'm advocating for Florida State right now. I'm advocating because I'm gonna always be about these Florida teams. But along the way, I'm advocating for Georgia. Georgia won 29 straight games and lost the SEC championship game by 3 points, and you're denying them a shot at the dance just because you promoted Texas so that you could put Bama in there? Committee, are you serious? This is why people look at the corruption. So I've listened to both sides of the argument all day long today and all day yesterday. And what I've heard is that Alabama passes the eye test and FSU doesn't, because FSU's quarterback is hurt, and even their second string quarterback would not be appealing to see in a championship game. Are you serious? 13-0, a Power 5 team, the ACC champion, the same conference that Clemson dominated from all those years. Remember Clemson won national championships. It was always Clemson and Alabama. They came from the ACC. Clemson lost this year to FSU in overtime. Are you serious? You didn't hold that conference against them then. So your explanation is this is not the same FSU team that ran the table throughout the season because 2 weeks ago their quarterback went down. Well, the Bama team that jumped up and played the game of their life and defeated a somewhat lackluster Georgia team is not the same team that almost limped out of the game with the University of South Florida with the W, with the L. They almost lost that game. How about last week when their arch rival Auburn, they were in last week's dang dog, because Auburn let them off the hook at the last minute, letting them score from like 4th and 90 years, let them score a touchdown. If they had just beat them, this whole mess would have been handled. We wouldn't be dealing with this. College Football Playoff Committee. Thankfully, you're expanding that to more of a tournament next year. And this kind of controversy wouldn't come up. But on the last year that you had 4 teams, you let an opportunity slide to have 3 undefeated teams and one-loss team in there. I knew why you said Texas in there, because you couldn't elevate Bama over them. You wanted your little Alabama in there because Alabama is your ratings darling. College Football Playoff Committee. Are you serious? You got past you skirted all of your criteria that's on your website, and you inserted one now to say if a coach or a player is not there, that could be a factor. You did that after the fact. Are you serious? Okay, I'm going to let that one go. I listened to both sides of the argument. I'm going to settle down. Can you believe I agree with Governor Despicable in his protest of this move? Some people said that Florida State should have boycotted and not played the bowl game. They'll be playing a once-lost Georgia team, two straight national championship Georgia team who was going for a 3rd shot at the national championship. 29 straight games. They won one more game. They would have broken the record. So now they'll be playing. So here's what you're doing, FSU. You got an opportunity to come down here and win this game, and then do what UCF did several years ago when they were not invited to the dance. Beat Georgia, and that's going to be a tall task. And then if you beat Georgia, just declare yourselves national champions, and we'll celebrate you. Even as a Gator, we'll celebrate you. Okay. Hey, Georgia, y'all got dog too, man, because they let 2 teams in just to allow Bama in there. They'll fix the system someday. I got another Are You Serious tonight? Yeah, it's the SHIELD, the NFL, which stands for 2 things. Not for long. For you brothers, it's they have aspirations of going to the league, getting a college scholarship, and getting that exposure and going to the league. Know this: you better have you a good fallback. Get that college degree, even if you have to go back after you start playing a year somewhere. Go back and get that degree, because the NFL stands for not for long. But it also stands for the No Fun League. I should have had this. A couple of games ago, Tyreek Hill scored a touchdown down here, I want to say Joe Roberts Stadium. It's down in Hard Rock Stadium. He scored a touchdown, and after scoring in the end zone, he took the cell phone from the cameraman and filmed himself doing a flip. It's must-see TV. Go to YouTube and look at it. He filmed himself doing a flip. 3 weeks later, the SHIELD suspended him for the rest of the year, the photographer, for giving Tyreek his phone. And they said that he may not be there next year. Now, that's what sets you apart from the NBA. Are you serious? I mean, really, you're going to be that stuffy? You're going to be that rigid? You're going to be that hard? I can't say USMC because Mac's on board tonight. But you're going to be that stiff? Are you serious, NFL? You got to be kidding me. You couldn't slap him on the hand if that was against one of your precious little hardcore rules. You couldn't just suspend him for a game. You had to suspend him for the season and then threaten to not allow him to come back next year, that his job is done. You got to be kidding. Are you serious? NFL, that's the difference between you and the NBA. The NBA is more innovative. The NBA takes on cultural trends. That's why it has developed a whole new market, because it embraces the rap music community. But NFL, you stuffy guys, you old stuffy, you know what kind of man you are. Y'all couldn't do that. So this guy's done. Well, listen, shout out to Tyreek Hill. Shout out to the Cheetah. He paid that man's salary for the rest of the year, the salary that the No Fun League cut off. Hopefully, he'll be back to his precious job. Those are cherished jobs. He's an NFL photographer. Hopefully, they'll avoid this public relations debacle and let him back on next year. Shout out Tyreek Hill. Are you serious, NFL? Okay, back to the dialogue. Max said that the first time he saw cable TV was with my brothers at our house. That's amazing because I guess cable had been in 20 years at that point, maybe 30 years, 20 years. It was certainly an innovative product, and it made it allowed more networks. Some regional, local TV stations now became national. We don't even talk about TBS anymore. Channel 17 out of Atlanta. How many of y'all remember the local commercial that it used to do for the nightclub, Mr. V's? And at the end of the commercial, say the only person missing at Mr. V's is you. Well, cable would take local stations like the TBS, the Superstation out of Atlanta, WGN out of Chicago. Those were local marketed stations, and they would take them and make them national on cable. And then finally, those stations started focusing their commercials and their programs to national. Now, because of the success of TVN going national, TBS, they have they launched a sister network, TNT, which really took off. And TNT does a lot of their sports program. It does the NBA. And so that was the advent of cable. But we're going to see if cable is able to adjust to this innovation of streaming, and if they're going to find what cable companies are doing is that they're offering, lots of them are offering these streaming networks for your smart TV, and you can pay. Of course, if you get smart TV, you don't need to have cable to do them, but they're trying to hang on as their viewership is vastly diminishing. But let's talk about podcasts. This is it took Kim to tell me this is what this was. So I guess I can't do too many more. Can't do but one Are You Serious Tonight, because I've lost my voice almost doing that one. So what we have here is the Pivot podcast, and the Pivot is Ryan Clark. Ryan Clark is a former Pittsburgh Steeler with LSU. He is currently an analyst on ESPN. He does their Monday night. He's always on the scene of Monday night games. He's on all of the programming across ESPN throughout the day. Ryan Clark, Shannon Crowder, who is an ex-Dolphin and an ex-Gator, who did a lot of local radio here before. And I don't know if he may still be doing that. I don't listen to a whole lot of local radio sports channels anymore. And along with him is Fred Taylor, also a former Gator, and also former Jacksonville Jaguar. I think he did a year up with Belichick. But hopefully there's a campaign to get Fred into the Hall of Fame. But they make the Pivot podcast. Now, the Pivot, originally, some of the members of the Pivot started out with I can't think of his name. I can think of his Brian. He played wide receiver for the Dolphins, and I think he went somewhere and retired somewhere else. But Brian, I can't think of his last name. He had, I think it was called A Professional, and those guys had a parting of ways, and they started the Pivot, and it's an interesting name. The Pivot is an interesting name because it means we have pivoted from one place to another, and they make the case that you're always pivoting. So Brian Marshall, B. Marshall, that's his name. Thanks, Mac. Yeah, B. Marshall. They all started out together, and so they started and they had a split, but they made the Pivot. And their podcast, they usually do a show They're not like Go Giga is great for us. They allow us to come on the networks on Monday nights consistently. I think I picked up a camera, a YouTube live, a Facebook live camera. Uh, 3 years ago during the heart of the pandemic, I see people do Facebook live. What's that? Nobody wants to see you on this. So I did that. And of course, during the pandemic, the world was kind of shut down, and many of us were relegated, like I was, to this man cave. And so I would just talk and get people like Max started on with us, and we would discuss issues back and forth. And so Go Giga picked me up, and they picked me up, and you see how professionally they present our show. And it took him to tell me, man, you got that podcast, a good thing you got going. Keep it up. And many times I thought about this, man. I said, no, keep it up. So I guess we're a podcast. But the Pivot is one of the better ones. They don't do every Monday night or every like broadcast TV like we are. Oh, got to get out of the tradition, right, Dozell? I guess so. But they'll do one maybe every 2 weeks or so. And of course, with their Celebrity Dome, they're able to get the top stars. They get athletes, they get music people, entertainers, and they've even had a couple of political figures on, and they do a great job. And the thing about the podcast is that you don't have the broadcast limitation as far as speech. I prefer not to hear F-bombs, but that's just me, and those kinds of things. But they have people that do those, that they come on and they talk, and they're real raw. They had the Pouncey brothers on a few weeks ago, and I learned a lot. I didn't know these guys were like right-wing, Donald Trump loving Republicans. I didn't know that they were raised in a trailer park over in Lakeland. I just know they were part of those great teams in Lakeland that really put them on the map, and I liked them because they always beat St. Thomas when they got to the championship games. And then they became Gators, so really liked them. And then one of them went to my beloved Steelers, and they were twins. They're twins. And I never could tell Maurice or the other Pouncey which was which, but I think the one that played with the Steelers did get a ring while playing with the Steelers. So they're both retired. But that was a very fascinating interview. They sat down with them, they discussed their political views, they discussed their backgrounds and why they had the views they had. They're biracial, and it was a very insightful. And of course, my man RC he's an analyst, and he's on the network every day, so he's polished. And Crowder is pretty polished, and then Fred is just a smart brother. So it's very insightful. That's the Pivot podcast, and I pick it up on YouTube because Dozell turned me on to all of these. And then the next podcast that this is a great one. Shannon Shaw, Club Shay Shay. You know the situation that went on with him at he was the co-host with Skip Bayless on Undisputed. And just about this time last year, when the young man was injured, the Buffalo Bill player was injured, they got into it about a tweet that Skip put out on the airways, and they discussed it the next day, and it just blew up into and Shannon Sharp said what you want to say about he is a man of principle. It blew up into something that became residual, and he finally made a decision to back away from Undisputed. But even at the end of his tenure, I think about this time last year, he launched Club Shay Shay, and he features it's sponsored by the company that makes his alcoholic beverage of choice, which is named after, I can't think of the name of it, but he has some very fascinating interviews, and most of them emanate from his studio, his man cave right there out on the west coast of LA. And the most recent one featured Beast Mode, Marshawn Lynch. And if you know Beast Mode is really, really raw. And okay, Laporte, yeah, gotcha. So they gotcha, man. So he had Beast Mode on, and of course, like I said, you're not restricted by FCC guidelines as far as what you say and those kinds of things. So Beast Mode in his own raw way, you got a great insight to him. He talked about this relationship with Russell Wilson, or lack thereof. He talked about the decision that Seattle made to pass the ball that gave the despised New England Patriots that interception in that Super Bowl win, instead of just handing him the ball and letting him end the game with a few seconds left. He talked about he didn't hide anything, and he's real raw. He even talked about his appearance and said, coach tried to get him to change. He said, "That's not me. I'm not going to be." So that's like his most recent. Well, I think he must have recorded that week before last. Last week he had Ric Flair. Ric Flair was in Club Shay Shay, and that was a great one. For those of us who peep the wrestling game coming up, or keep an eye on it now, it was an awesome. So his podcast usually runs. Most of these podcasts, his and the Pivot last about an hour and a half every time they cut them. Like I say, they don't do a weekly one like we do at a specific time, but they'll just do one like every couple of weeks, every 2 or 3 weeks, and then they'll put it out there, and people are just yearning to see who they're interviewing next. These are some alternatives to regular broadcast viewing. And then the last one, if you would, sis, please put Stephen A. back up there. Stephen A. Smith has, as I mentioned earlier, launched his podcast maybe 4 months ago. It's simply called the Stephen A. Smith Show. And Stephen A. Does he started out in his home studio, and he has now built the studio because he has a vision for doing a lot more things on the self market. And what really caught my attention, and actually was probably the impetus for this show, was I was looking at him. He had Kevin Garnett, and everybody was talking about the interview. And Kevin Garnett, like Beast Mode, is a fascinating figure. He's going to tell you what he thinks, and he's going to do it in a raw fashion, even though he's highly intelligent. And they were talking about it, and they were challenging each other. And KG was saying to Stephen A., he said, "Man, you're the guy that's got us all involved in this, and you're the ones that we look up to." And in certain ways, I do look up to him because of what Stephen A's done. He started as a beat writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, was hired by ESPN, and has worked he's been fired by ESPN, brought back on that ESPN. He's been over to Fox, and now he is the face of ESPN. And so they're saying that KG was saying, "Man, now that you're doing your own thing," he said, "you're the one that we're looking up to." Yeah. Or anytime Ocho Mac is on a podcast, it's going to be real and raw. And I think sometimes he has Ocho on. He's been a recurring guest for him because he's also opinionated. He got a lot of stuff to say. But KG was and you really want to go back and look at it now. KG is going to drop F-bombs. He's going to tell you like it is. But just bear through that and hear what he was saying. And he challenged Stephen A. And Stephen A. in terms challenged him because you don't see him on TV. You used to see Garnett on TV, on sports shows. Now he has done like his own thing now. And so he's starting his own network. It's called, I looked at it. It's called a cartel. It's called some communication cartel. That's not the name, but it's something along that order. And Stephen A. was encouraging him to just take that to the next level. And it was just exciting seeing these two brothers dialogue and talk about how we can do this. And Stephen A.'s thing is, man, I'm going to go out and create my own thing, because even though I'm making, these 7 figures over at ESPN, I've been fired enough to know that that's not permanent. I would hope that it goes to the next level at the next contracting period, but that's not permanent. So it's just been awesome watching these brothers and sit down and just watch them. And another podcast, and somehow I didn't get the slide over to the producers, was and no ask me the kid's name. He played, Mac help me. He played for the Sixers. He's a shooter. He's out of Duke, and he played. He works for ESPN, I think. Still, he's got out and done so well in the podcast market. It's Three Old Men and Something is the name of his podcast. I don't see him on ESPN. He was even providing color commentary at some of the games. Why can't I think of his name? I can see him plain as day. But anyway, they produce a great podcast. Now, I'm going to close out this segment on podcasts. I'm going to close out the show. Time is on us. Pat McAfee had what was tantamount to a glorified podcast. Disney, who owns ESPN, made a mandate because Disney made, I know, man. I just can't think of his name. I almost said it. I can see his face, just can't call his name. Disney gave a mandate. They made cuts across all of their platforms. They cut. ESPN cut. They cut. Ended up being Mark Jackson. By the way, Mark Jackson is on the most recent version of Club Shay Shay. You sure want to see that because he's talking about leaving ESPN and the controversy over at Madison Square Garden, where he had landed after being cut by ESPN. Cut him. They cut. Oh gosh, my mind is just going crazy. Like the two brothers that were Pat Riley's assistant football coaches. Basketball coaches. They both coached. Stan and Jeff. They cut Jeff. They cut several big names. They cut Steve Young from Monday Night Football. They cut quite a few people. Stan Van Gundy. Yeah, thank you, Stan Van Gundy. They cut Jeff Van Gundy. They made several cuts, but then they brought on Pat McAfee, and he comes on after First Take on weekdays. And Pat McAfee's show it's not my cup of tea. The real Royism. He flirts and they even do a disclaimer at the beginning of the show. It's just not my cup of tea. But anyway, they cut a lot of people and they gave him a $1 billion contract. I'm exaggerating, but it was something like that. And so they gave him a big contract. So podcasts, he took a glorified podcast, and his claim to fame is that he has Aaron Rodgers on every Tuesday on his podcast. And so now he has a standing show. He's part of the ESPN family, but ESPN lets some great analysts go basically to accommodate his contract. So podcasts are the next big things that's going on. And like Stephen A. said, you see them when you feel like seeing them. You look at as much as you want to. You pause them. You go back and you end them. So streaming services, podcast, and we were in Europe a few weeks ago and unable to see any American TV. That was just hard for me to handle. I told y'all I'm a TV holic. I couldn't see my dog Morning Joe. But what Morning Joe was doing, and they do this on YouTube, the next day they show a highlight of the previous day's show. It's like 45 minutes. And so that's a great thing. So I could see that on YouTube when we were in the Airbnb, but we didn't have that on the ship. But once we got on the ship, we could see some American program. Of course, we were 6 hours ahead of America, so that was strange. But there was no NFL. You could see any NFL football. We were that close to Germany. We had no way of seeing the game between the Dolphins and the Chiefs. That was just difficult to do. But through streaming, you could pull YouTube up and kind of have an idea as to what was going on. Of course, you get the internet. You can look at the newspapers. You could see what was happening, but you couldn't see it in real time. And you could rarely, you couldn't even get the good clips. But now, if you want to save money, streaming TV is a way to do it. Podcasts, ways to keep us entertained and informed. They're just some of the things that have changed our TV viewing habits. It'll be interesting to revisit this in about 5 years and see has there been an integration of the two forces and to see how that works out. So as I see it as time will tell if cable TV is going to survive this onslaught of streaming services, or if there are going to be mergers and buyouts and those kinds of things to keep several of these entertainment giants alive. And the other thing is that, Disney buys ESPN and ABC. NBC is owned by Comcast Universal. NBC and all of their properties. So all of these corporate giants are coming together to kind of control the industry. And there's been one certain orange fella that says if he becomes president, he's going to shut down a certain news network that's an antithesis to his philosophy. We'll see. But as I see it, there are a lot of choices out there to meet your media needs. But in the middle of all of them, make sure you never, ever miss Dialogue with Dozell. It is live on Monday nights on YouTube and Facebook. And I'm able to communicate with great people like Matt that have been with us from the beginning. You see how he's helping me out tonight. But if you miss it, you can go back and see it anytime you want to because it streams on YouTube. This has been Dialogue with Dozell. We're going to see you next Monday night, 8 p.m., YouTube, Facebook Live. Until then, God's richest blessing, man. Have a great time. Make this a great week. Be careful during the Christmas season, but enjoy the Christmas spirit. We love you. Dialogue with Dozell. We're out.